Hi. Oh, that's the wrong browser. Let's see, one more second. Sorry about that. I'll be right with you. Just got to make sure I get the correct settings here. I don't know why that's showing that screen, but what are you going to do? What are we showing now? Okay. Well, this one's better anyway because we get slow playback. All right. Well, hello there. My name is Scott Johnson. I run the Low Technology Institute, and this year we tried to grow all our own food, and we called it Foodmageddon. We actually announced it at last year's Garden Expo, and we are going to be talking about how much food we were able to grow, how we did it. You'll see some video and some other interesting tidbits about what would happen if you had to grow all your own food. I should point out, all of this information is available at the Low Technology Institute website, which is lowtechinstitute.org. Our main goal is to figure out ways that individuals, households, and communities can be more self-sufficient in a future with less dependence on fossil fuels. So that's kind of where we were coming from when we decided about a year and a quarter ago that we would try and simulate the collapse of fossil fuels and grow all our own food. We started talking about it in November of 2019, and then it actually started in February of 2020. This was before we knew the pandemic was coming, so we were able to get a lot of our feet under us and going before all the craziness started. So we were really lucky. But we made everything into a YouTube video, which if you're watching this right now on YouTube, you can subscribe or find the playlist on our page called Foodmageddon, and you can watch from the beginning. We have a series showing basically everything we did every week or month, depending on how often we were able to make videos, about how we grew all our own food, or as much of it as we could, and we'll talk about that here as we go. So let's switch to this screen because I realize that my video is pretty choppy, but it actually works pretty well once I start getting into the presentation. So again, my name is Scott. Feel free to ask questions in the chat on the right here. I'll try to answer them as they come up and show up. There's a little bit of a lag here, so I'm a couple minutes ahead of you, so I'll get to your questions as soon as I see them. And yeah, so thanks for joining us. And I hope you're enjoying the virtual Wisconsin Garden Expo. We miss being there in person. It's always a fun weekend, a busy weekend, but it's always fun to meet so many interesting, fun, new people that we always do. It's kind of a disappointment, but you know, this is the worst thing that happens this year, then we'll count ourselves lucky. So again, the premise of our study, or our anecdotal study, I suppose, was what would happen if fossil fuels disappeared in terms of food. And most of us think about going to the grocery store and filling up our car with gas to do that, but really so much of our food system today, as you probably know, is completely dependent on fossil fuels, from the fertilizers to the machinery to the processing plants to the refrigeration chain. You know, every step of the way, it's fossil fuels. So without fossil fuels, we would have a vastly different foodscape. And you know, what would happen to our family if that happened? How would we try and grow all our own food? And so what we did was we came up with a scenario of a collapse, basically. And the idea was, in January there was some sort of catastrophe. It shut down fossil fuel production, and so each month there would be new problems. This would be a slow-moving disaster. There would be some acute early things, but it would be a long-term thing. So in our scenario in February, there's some sort of disaster, and this is about 80% of our energy consumption and 95% of our transportation energy. So, during the gas crisis in the 70s and other times, we can kind of get some parallels to this. But for us, this means, okay, let's assume the worst and hope for the best. And so this is in February last year, we started really planning how are we going to support ourselves. By March in our scenario, we have a strategic oil reserve, but we are rationed in gas, so we only can use a quarter of our usual gas. This means that we can only go down to the grocery store a quarter of the time that we used to, and we used to go twice a week, but now we can only go twice a month, so that changes things. And in April, we said, okay, crops are in, because farmers are still going to put their crops in, but fresh produce is not really available at the grocery store. Long-distance transportation networks are shutting down for perishable foods. It's just too expensive. So at this point, we can no longer. Last April, we stopped buying fresh foods that depended on transportation: lettuce, tomatoes, asparagus, that sort of thing. We already grew a lot of that ourselves. But by May, we wanted to simulate the prices of things going up, and so we cut our food budget in a quarter. And we could only go, I believe, once a week, or once a month, or maybe that's the next month. But so we could only buy a quarter of what we used to be buying, and we could only buy shelf-stable goods. And then by June, we're saying gas is so expensive, we can only go once with a gas-powered vehicle to buy groceries, and we can still only buy a quarter of our usual budget, and only non-perishables. By July, no more gas. And so by July, I was riding my bike once, as much as I wanted, but once or twice a month to the grocery store. And again, we only had, I think it was $25 to spend. $25 to spend each time, $50 a month. By August, I think we only went to the grocery store once, if I remember correctly, and only spent like $30. So starting in September, we were cut off from the outside world, as it were. And since September, we have been, growing all our own food and seeing how we would go. But really, although the cutoff was in September, we were only spending $50 a month at the grocery store for 3 months before that, buying nothing fresh, and only going by bike. So it really limited what we could get. So, it wasn't just since September that we've been doing this. It's been a full year since February, really. And there were some other parameters. So we had to get everything from within the confines or the surroundings of the Low Technology Institute, which is where we are. We're about 6 miles south of Stoughton, or 25 miles south of Madison. And we had additional rules on top of our timeline. I'm just pulling these up here, sorry. You can find a lot more of these details at the Low Technology Institute website. Under research, you can see all of our research projects that we've done. So solar water heating, potato growing methods might be interesting for a lot of gardeners. Bee breeding, I'll be doing a talk on beekeeping for gardeners at 6 o'clock this evening, so you can check right back here on our YouTube live page for that. Three Sisters companion planting, that's something we're trying to get funding for. And Foodmageddon here down at the bottom has a lot of the data that I'll be talking about today. But in addition to really having fewer and fewer trips to the grocery store and food available, we had some other rules that we had to follow. For example, we could only grow on half an acre because we didn't want to, have 3 acres available to us and grow so much food that would be not really a feasible amount of space for a family to grow on in, say, in a suburban lot. According to Zillow and other places, a lot of suburban lots have a quarter acre available to them. And then there's green spaces and other things that could be turned into gardens. So even in the suburbs, you could grow quite a lot of food. We had to eat primarily what we grew and preserved without fossil fuels. Obviously, that's the whole point. We didn't stockpile an excessive amount. We couldn't really buy more than we would usually buy in. So we had we usually buy in bulk and store it in the basement before this, but we weren't able to buy like 3 bags of 50-pound bags of rice. We were only able to buy 1. We didn't want to artificially stack the odds in our favor. We did consider that we could harvest surplus food from neighbors. So like there's an abandoned apple orchard not far from here. So we did, so for example here, you can see our plot is long and thin, and this tan area, this is our main garden area. Our neighbor over here used to be a market gardener, as you can see, and he lent us some space in the greenhouse and over here to grow as well, and I'll talk about that as we go along. But these were windfall sorts of things. We also couldn't just go out and buy fossil fuel related tools. In September or October, November, I couldn't go to the store and buy something for food production if it wasn't already there. So basically, just like with food purchases at the grocery store, I couldn't go buy things later on. I had to think ahead and buy them ahead of time. So I had to buy a whole bunch of canning lids. I ended up buying 100 canning lids in like April before there was a shortage in the fall, so I got really lucky. Same thing with jars. And so as we went throughout the year, we grew everything we could. We'll walk through a little bit here. You can also see our garden if you go to the Wisconsin Garden Expo page and then click on Garden Tours here at the top. We are the second to last garden tour, so we were really excited to be featured. And here's that. You can scroll through and you can actually have a look in our garden. And you can see all the different zones, what we grew in each location, what we've been doing here, what sort of infrastructure we have, and then most of the way down, so there's little videos and things of a tour I made this summer, and then most of the way down we've got also our in-ground greenhouse. Where is it? Here it is. And it's like it's a interactive 3D photograph of our in-ground greenhouse that I'll talk about a little later. But yeah, check out the Wisconsin Garden Expo page. We were really flattered to be picked to be one of the gardens that was given as a tour on the site. So yeah, have a look at that, and you can see some of exactly what we were growing. So we also harvested 1/10 of an acre of wheat off of our neighbors, and then I also planted 1/10 of an acre of wheat this fall. So this was industrial wheat. This is wheat that was it's modern wheat to be harvested by a combine, and I harvested it by hand with a scythe and processed it, and hopefully we'll get to that video today. But it was a learning process, and one of the things I learned is don't harvest industrial wheat. You should really look for heritage wheat, and that's what I planted this year, so I'm really excited to harvest that this week. And if you're interested in any of this, you should head over to our website, and you can see that we do events, and we have classes and workshops. So this summer we hope to be doing timber framing of a compost hutch, so that will involve various weekends, and this will be a free class, I believe, where we're dressing timbers one weekend, where we're cutting joints another weekend, where we're assembling the frame another weekend, and then we'll be roofing and doing other things, and we'll actually use the thatch from the straw to put on this roof to cover it. So that's a class we'll be doing this summer. We'll be doing beehive inspections and working with bees. We'll also do a wheat harvest, and this will be by hand with a scythe, and then we'll thresh and process the wheat, and the same thing with rye. And then, like I said, we'll be thatching. So we have workshops coming up. So if you're interested in hearing about when our workshops come up, go to our website, go to the bottom, and you can subscribe to our listserv. And we'll just send you announcements when we have classes coming up. We won't spam you with other things. We don't know how to do that. We also have a blog where we talk about a lot of these things. You could sign up there for our blog. But anyway, so back to Foodmageddon. And like I said, we could use our neighbor's surplus. This is the apple orchard. It's an abandoned apple orchard that I have to get out to. I should do it this weekend, but it's going to be next weekend. Getting out there to start pruning some of the ridiculous overgrowth here. But And the way that so far we have published our results, we have done some on the blog, but most of it is on the website or on YouTube on our Foodmageddon page. So definitely have a look at that. One second. So, sorry, yesterday I was getting text messages alerting me to problems with the feed, so I just wanted to check that. Sorry for checking my phone during the middle of a presentation. But why don't we kind of walking through our year? I'll show you some of the things that we got up to, some of the clips, and yeah. So the first thing we're going to look at is maple syruping, because sugar or sweetener, obviously most of us eat too much sweetener in our diet today, but if we had a collapse of industrial society, sugar would be an important source of calories, and so either maple syrup or honey are going to be our primary sources, and we have both bees and a grove of maples. I'm looking at it across the commons right now. So this first clip is going to be of us or me starting to gather maple syrup. So let's switch over to that.
Maple syrup season is in full swing. Luckily we've had some nice weather, so I can be outside boiling down the sap. Every 2 days I pop over here, my little cart, and grab all of the sap. On the other days, well, honestly now every day I'm boiling. My goal is 4 gallons. Because that's a lot of calories that we can use all winter. Not to mention, I don't know where we're going to buy sugar otherwise. Today's haul is 16 gallons here and another 8 gallons across the street. So that's a total of almost 24 gallons, meaning I've gathered about 100 gallons of sap already this year, and the taps are still going strong. My goal for the year is 4 gallons, and I'll hit that mark this week. Luckily.
So yeah, we did actually, we made 4 gallons, and we still have about 1.5 gallons left in the basement, so we would sail through into the spring pretty easily with the amount we made, not to mention our honey on top of that. So, so yeah, maple syruping, big source of calories, also a lot of work, but it certainly pays off. We also learned from the year before when we lost a lot of our corn to raccoons and deer. In the back 40 area, our back larger planted out field, and so this year I decided to put in a fence that would help keep them out. I invested a bit of time in that, because even if you live in the city, you're probably used to creatures getting more than their fair share of your garden. So our next video will be me putting in the fence.
This will hold up the 6-foot netting, and then there's going to be another post here, and that's going to hold up the electric fence. And this is around the back 40 to keep out deer, raccoons, and rabbits, which are the scourge of what I grew here last year. And down here, I have the electric fence posts. So I need to hang up the netting and string the electric wire. Hopefully before it starts raining or it gets dark.
Okay, so our electric fence actually worked really well. We didn't have any deer or raccoon or rabbit incursions, and I went off of a study done by the University of Vermont where my electric fence was not 7 feet tall that you would imagine to keep a deer out. It was actually one single line, 3 feet tall, and the way it worked was you put a piece of peanut butter in a little tin foil and then folded it over the line and let it hang there, and the deer would come, sniff the peanut butter, and get a zap on the nose. It doesn't hurt them, it just shocks them and scares them. And the deer, as you know, are pretty flighty, and so they learn that white line will shock them and they stay away. Even though they could easily sail across this fence, none of them tried. I never had a single deer footprint in the soft soil. So it worked out really well. And then we had a line at 12 inches and a line at 6 inches, and that kept the rabbits and the raccoons out. So I'll be repeating that this year. It was a solar-powered electrical fence, and it really worked out because we depend on these large field crops. We were also not able to depend on nurseries to get a lot of our plants or starts. We've been trying to start more of our own plants for years, but this year we really had to depend on starting our own starts. So let's have a look at that.
So I have some lettuce that's grown up, but it's starting to get leggy, which means it's got these long stalks. So what I'm going to do, their own little individual cells, and then let them grow up and get a little bigger. I've got Freckles lettuce as well as Rouge d'Hiver that I'm going to be transplanting here.
Alright, so we all have an idea of what that's like. This year I'm going to be using soil blocks. I just got if you don't know what soil blocks are, it's essentially compressed and extruded little blocks of soil and peat moss and sand and perlite that hold together and replace the need for plastic seed planters. And if you are anywhere near us, you can give that a try because we have in addition to workshops and events, we also have a tool library, and our neighbors and members of the organization are welcome to come and borrow all kinds of tools, not just our soil block creator, but we've got everything from basics like that to power tools and all kinds of here you can see hand tools, gardening tools. We've got a garden seeder. All kinds of great stuff for gardening. So if you have extra people coming over to help you, you don't have to buy extra shovels or have them wait around. You can come borrow them from us. So that's one of the services we try and provide to our neighborhood and our members. I should mention we are a 501c3 institute, and we do have memberships and we accept donations and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, definitely check us out online. And if you're just joining us, you might want to pop back to the beginning at about minute 3 when we started, because I live out in the country and have terrible internet, so I'm a little choppy. I realize that, but hopefully my voice is coming through. If you go back to the beginning, you'll probably have a much less you'll have an uninterrupted stream, at least in terms of audio and visual. Okay, so now moving on, let's talk about our chickens, because we couldn't go to the grocery store and buy meat, could we? So if we wanted meat, we had to depend on food that meat that we butchered ourselves. And so we have chickens, and we have hatched them out before, and so this year we hatched them out again. So let's have a look at that. There was one more thing before that, and I forgot what it was. So never mind, let's go right to the video, and I'll remember what I wanted to say here in a second. Okay.
Push, push. Come on.
Come on, chicken. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, oh, look at them wiggling out.
Yeah. Another black one.
That's how it was last time, remember? It was all black ones in the beginning.
Yay! We're gonna breathe in hard.
That was so much work, huh?
Yay!
You've got a friend now.
Hi and welcome. It's the beginning of April and we're really enjoying spring. As you saw, we have chickens hatching, so that's really exciting. We are also working on the fence line. This time we're working on the fence. May or may not come on out the next. They're ready to come out of the incubator. The yellow one just hatched, so he or she is going to stay for the rest of the night there. We have a couple more eggs that have pipped but haven't hatched yet, so their lungs are adjusting to air and all that, so they may or may not come on out the next 24 hours, and hopefully the rest of these will also pip and start coming out. So let's see as we move these black ones to their new habitat. So yeah, we're really excited about the chickens coming out. Our hatch rate wasn't as good as we would have liked. We started out with 34 eggs, but we only got 8 chickens, which is actually pretty poor. Usually you can expect around 50% hatch rate. I think what the underlying thing was I kept them out too long before putting them in the incubator after they were laid by the hens. That's probably where I ran into trouble. So of course my big goal this year was to have the chickens hatch their own eggs, and the reason was it would save me all this trouble. I wouldn't have had to 3 times a day rotate all the eggs and make sure that everything is the right temperature and humidity and all that. I wouldn't have had to do that. Drink there. I mean, how would they know? They don't have a mother to show them where to drink. To the new enclosure, I have to dip its beak in water because otherwise it won't know to drink there. I mean, how would they know? They don't have a mother to show them where to drink. And another thing you notice, there's no food in here. And that's because if I give them food, they might eat a whole bunch of food. And then they get what's called pasting up, where all that food without water rehydrates in their intestines, and then they get an obstructed bowel. And so we had 7 of those chickens survive to adulthood, 2 of which we gave to a neighbor, 2 of which we kept, and 3 of which we ate. We actually have a video about how we butcher our chickens on our YouTube page if that's something that interests you. We also talk about podcasts. We have a podcast called the Low Tech Podcast. You can find it on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, all those places. And episode number 8 discusses meat. So if you're interested in hearing the whys and wherefores of our meat eating, check it out there. We try and wrestle with the environmental impacts of meat consumption and things like that, and how we've decided to eat only meat that we kill and butcher ourselves, so that reduces our footprint quite a lot. And so now let's talk a little bit more about that greenhouse that we saw a little while ago. Oops, sorry about that. Here, oh, you're getting a look behind the curtain. Okay, we'll pop right into this video. I've only been waiting for 2 years to have a functioning greenhouse, and I finally do. Getting all these out of the house and into where they belong. This is pretty exciting. In addition to working on the greenhouse, I've also been continuing to make garden beds. It's almost a never-ending process in the spring because we have to get all the cardboard out, all the mulch out, source all of the compost and everything else that we need to do. So it's been busy, and it's been extra hard because we have less gasoline available. So this month I basically have 1 tank of gas for my truck to get all the mulch, all the compost, all the cardboard, everything I need for the garden this month. I only have 1 tank to get it with, and I have no idea how much gas I'm going to have next month if all of this continues. Hi! Hi! Yes, you're such a ham.
You're such a ham. Today we are out here to get some beds ready for the peas. The peas are sprouted, they're coming up, they're ready to be transplanted soon, so I got to whip these beds into shape. So let's do a quick discussion of what I have here. And the point of doing all this, of course, is to keep my weed load down. It also builds soil. I'm not churning it up. This is called no-dig gardening. If I turn it up and I destroy everything that's in it, it also breaks down the microbes and the microbial life, the fungal life, all the things that make soil get disturbed when you deep till it. That's why I'm doing this no-dig method where I cover everything up and mulch it. Over years, I'm building up more and more soil. I have a foot of deep soil here, and that's because I've been doing this for 3 years now. As I said, this is year 3 of no-dig gardening, so let's just have a look. So these are cilia. These grow they're kind of invasive. They grow all over the neighborhood. So, but if we go down a bit farther, you see we have pretty good, we have good soil all the way down. And a lot of this is originally clay, but because we just pile on more organic matter every year and smother it, we're really able to keep the organic content high. And even though I'm putting cardboard on, I'm going to plant through the cardboard. So this is the medium I'm going to be planting into. And as I'm hoeing this all together to prepare the bed for the year, I get any incipient invasives that I see. I saw some wild parsnip over there and some others. So I try and prepare it as much as I can before covering it up. And each year there's a less and less weed load. Picture of what this looked like before. It was completely grown over with invasive trees and brush. All of this that I'm putting on will break down and become soil next year. And so I have my 2 pathways. I've got my cardboard covered by straw. And if we move over here, you can see how we're making it. So we've got a bed covered by cardboard. These are the sides of the bed, pushed off to the side. This will be a pathway. It's going to be filled with mulch. And then this is the next bed that hasn't been worked yet. I'm going to pull last year's pathway onto it that's rotted now, cover it with cardboard, cover it with straw, put the sides on, and it will be a good bed just like all the rest of them. Good morning. It's another weekend day, so I'm out here to plant flax.
Okay, yeah, so that was starting out with the greenhouse, the in-ground greenhouse, where we had some starts, and we'll see that again in a little bit. But we also had there the lasagna gardening type approach that I take, and I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Takes some cardboard and some mulch, or some compost if you have it, to smother, but everywhere I do that method, I have almost no weeds to deal with, and I'll show in another video how I plant into it. So far it's been a really great method, which I picked up all over the internet, but one of the main places I go, and I'll pull this up here, is on YouTube, is Charles Dowding. I don't know if you've heard of him, but if you sorry about this.
Maple syrup season is in.
Nope. Sorry, I can't multitask. But if you go to YouTube and type in Charles Dowding, he is an English market gardener, and he has just the best instructional videos and no-dig. He's a big proponent of no-dig, no-till gardening, and his results speak for themselves. And if you need a little inspiration when you're feeling a little overworked in the summer, you know, just have a watch of one of his videos, and it's just so, I mean, beautiful. Just, yeah, one of those, you look at something on Instagram and you're like, wow, that's so great, but I mean, this, it really seems to be the good. So yeah, have a look at that. It's one of my favorite resources on lasagna gardening. So some people call it lasagna or cover smother gardening, or I'm already stockpiling cardboard. I was just chatting with my brother-in-law. He said he had 100 boxes for me, so that's exciting. I'm going to be getting a whole truckload of cardboard, which I will use all of it. One of the big crops that we grew, and I talked about it last night. Actually, if you go to our YouTube page and look in the live streams, I did a talk last night on why potatoes are a really important crop for food security in history and also in our future, I think. And so if you want to hear about why the Irish potato famine was a man-made disaster and not just a biological one, you might want to check that out. It also talks about the history of the potato, the evolution of the potato. This is a completely selfish plug for my talk last night. But I will show you a little bit about our potato planting this year. I did a study in 2018 with USDA funding with 10 market gardeners here in southern Wisconsin, and we learned all about how to grow potatoes in the most efficient way possible without machinery. And if you want to hear more about that, you can go to our website, click on the research tab, and right here, potato growing methods has all kinds of information. We did a podcast. I don't know if we did a podcast on it, but we definitely have infographics. Here's a poster, an infographic, a write-up here that was also in Mother Earth News last year. All of our data is there for you to crunch yourself if you want. There's a video, so yeah, definitely check that out. If you grow potatoes, it's certainly worth a recommendation. So let me now we're going to go through it real quickly in this video, but we have a more in-depth video that explains it all very clearly, so check that out if it's something you're interested in. So on to that video.
So just behind my flax field over here, I've got my potatoes. This is one of a few potato fields I'm making. And the idea here, right now there's piles of straw, but what I'm going to do, I already have some rows that I've dug in with the reel hoe. And what I'm going to do now is put the straw down between the rows. And that is hoping to smother the incipient growth that we have here, leave the rows open. I'll plant the potatoes, put down compost, turn them all together, and then as the potatoes grow up, I will move this mulch over on top of the potatoes to hill them up. I grow my potatoes on the surface, and the reason I do that is because I conducted a study with 10 market gardeners in southern Wisconsin. And we tried all kinds of different methods, 5 to be exact, different methods of growing potatoes. Growing them on the surface under straw mulch, under newspaper and straw mulch, digging them in, hilling them up like traditionally, growing them in potato towers, and also growing them in grow bags. And we found that planting them on the surface is probably your best bet if you have space, because it takes the least amount of energy for you to dig up each pound of potatoes. On a per pound basis, planting them on the surface is half as much work as digging them into the ground, while it is only a small percentage less productive in terms of tubers per square foot. So I have a whole video about this, and I will link to that here. You can check that out if you're interested in learning more about the potato study that we did. But suffice it to say, we plant on the surface with some compost and mulch. Well, that's all we...
Okay, so this year with our Foodmageddon project, we obviously knew that potatoes would be a big part of what we were hoping to do, and so we actually ended up planting quite a lot of potatoes with our neighbor, who's previously had been a market gardener. We planted out 1,000 potato plants because that's well more than we could eat. If this actually happened and we had complete systemic breakdown, people would be hungry, especially by the fall. If it happened in the spring, it would have gone 6 months to a year with disrupted food systems going into the winter. People would be worried. And potatoes are one of the easiest crops to grow, and I go into this in great detail in the live stream. Oh yeah, Ruth I see Ruth Stout was a permaculture potato grower who pioneered this grow potatoes on the surface method. Well, okay, she didn't actually pioneer it, because that's how the Inca. Sorry, small sidebar here. I'm seeing a question in the comments. Ruth Stout grew potatoes on the surface, but so did the Inca. That's actually how they grew them. They didn't grow them in trenches. They would dig trenches, but then plant the potatoes between them, and then hill the earth on top of them. So kind of, yeah, it's an old style method. But anyway, we grew 1,000 potato plants because we didn't know this spring what was going to happen with the pandemic, and so we decided to grow 1,000 potato plants, and it was very easy in terms of our labor versus amount of potatoes that came out. We grew them on the surface. They were easy to plant, easy to harvest, and my neighbor sent boxes and boxes and bushel boxes, tons of them, to the local food shelter in this fall. Luckily, we didn't have complete systemic collapse with the pandemic, but had something bad happened, we would have had, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds of potatoes to give away to our neighbors if it came to that. So luckily it didn't. My market gardener, or retired market gardener neighbor, also gave us access to his hoop house to get a little extra production. So now we're going to have a quick look at that.
It's time to plant tomatoes. My neighbor, who used to be a market gardener, still has this high house, this hoop house, and he's letting us use a little bit of space in here. So today, I'm going to be transplanting all these tomatoes into a couple of rows next to this trellis, and this will be a good chunk of our tomatoes for the year.
So I stop it there just so you can get a look at our in-ground greenhouse. That's what it looks like in the spring. I've done some work on it since then, but that's essentially how it looks. It's kind of just a big window that looks like it's growing out of the ground. That's actually our in-ground greenhouse, and again, you can see that on the Wisconsin Garden Expo tour of our garden. And I believe, if I remember correctly, the next video will actually go inside there as I talk about some more plants that we're growing out and some of the difficulty we had with a very late frost this year. I believe that is the next video. So here we go.
So my greenhouse is looking pretty good. My beans look great. They're really ready to be planted out, but like I said, it's going to freeze. Cilantro, parsley, my greens are looking good. Got some cabbage here. Yet again, I failed, I think, on my onions, and I do not know why.
Okay, quick side note. If you have a surefire way to grow onions from seeds, please let me know. I've been trying to grow onions from seeds every year, and every year I have to end up buying sets and slips and putting them in the ground, and that's how I get my onions, and it drives me crazy. Because I can grow everything else fine from seeds. Onions just drive me crazy. I can never get them to work. So if you have a surefire onion tip, or a process to grow onions from seeds, please get in contact with me. My name is Scott@lowtechinstitute.org, or my email. And yeah, let me know, especially if you're comfortable maybe writing up a short guide for it to publish as a blog, as a guest contributor on our blog. That would be great, because these onions drive me nuts. Anyway, yeah, we'll get back to the video here.
I try and keep them wet. I try and keep them watered. Maybe I overwater them. I don't know. And up here, I've got cabbages and broccolis, cauliflowers that are actually looking like plants that are going to work. Here we've got cucumbers. They're ready to go in the greenhouse next door. And I have a whole bunch of lettuce ready to be planted out. I have so much stuff it's ready to be planted out, but with the coming freeze this weekend, I have to wait a little longer, and they're kind of outgrowing their pots, and I don't want to up-pot them because that's just so much work for, just a couple of days. So hopefully they can hang on and it's not going to be too detrimental. So usually when we come in the greenhouse, I like to show you this side because it's got the plaster, or the cob wall, and the shell, and the
So yeah, that's been updated since then, and now has plaster on it, and you can see that again on the garden tour. We also just had a video come out this weekend or this Friday, updating it on the Wallapini in-ground greenhouse. So if you go to our YouTube page, you can see it right here, low-tech video number 23, Wallapini in-ground greenhouse. So that's definitely, if you're interested in hearing more about our in-ground greenhouse, this is a video for you. I would make some changes if I did it again, but it's a pretty great, I'm really enjoying having it. Right now it's, how many degrees out? I think it's like 15 degrees out, and it's 40 in there, and I haven't lit a fire in there for 48 or 36 hours. So it's a really efficient, nice way to keep plants warm in the winter. So definitely check that out. So now we're going to move on to talk about planting lettuce, and I'm going to show you how I plant through the cardboard. And this has been a really great method for me, and it really cuts down on the weeds.
All right, now we got lettuce. Now you might be thinking, hey, this looks like a lot more work to plant lettuce than I do. I just till my garden and then plant lettuce seeds, and then I just thin them to the distance and space I want. You seem like you have to do a couple extra steps here. There is a inverse proportion between efficiency and production. The more time you put in, the more product you can get out of it, often up to a point. Obviously there's diminishing returns at some point. But, you know, these 9 plants came from 9 seeds. I'm thinning them out now, right? So I get more plants per seed packet, but I spend more time, so it's a trade-off. Seed packets are, or were, cheap. I'll probably have way more seeds than I need next year, and maybe I won't do this, but it's just a different way to do it. It's less energetically efficient. I have to do more work, but I get pretty good results, at least so far. We'll see how that goes throughout the season. You'll get to see that as we go along. Now time for more peas. Okay, so next to my fava beans, I'm going to grow cucumbers. So they'll grow up and over as the fava beans.
Okay, so you could see there how I plant through the cardboard, and really that method has been wonderful for me. It's a little more work up front in the spring, but the dividends pay the rest of the year. I never had to weed that lettuce, and it grew all year and went to seed. I mean, it was great. The peas, you might be wondering, well, I always hear direct sow peas, and I do direct sow some peas, but if I can't keep every single rabbit out, you know, I'll come out one morning and they will all be eaten, whereas if I plant them as bigger seedlings, they have a better chance of survival. I've just had, it's an extra step, but really the lack of needing to weed, also the mulch and the straw on there keep a lot of moisture in. I rarely have to water, even when we have, you know, a week or two without rain. It's rare that I have to water. Straw as a mulch keeps the soil a little cooler, which is useful for plants like potatoes, and it also keeps water from splashing microbes and things up onto the plants. This is especially important with tomatoes that are susceptible to a lot of soil-borne pathogens. So if you can trim the bottom, you know, foot of leaves off of tomato plants as soon as possible, and then also have something on the ground so when water hits it, it doesn't splash soil up on the plants. That's really helped reduce the amount of pathogens I've had to deal with my tomatoes. And I don't grow hybrids. I save my own seeds, and when it comes to some pathogens, because I don't have that hybrid vigor that's grown into them. Another fun thing I did this summer was I built a little canal in the greenhouse to water all my tomatoes. So now we'll have
This is a soaker hose. It's like a regular hose, except it's porous, and so when the water pressure is turned on, water seeps out of it in a gentle way, watering the roots of the plants and not broadcast spraying like a like a sprinkler, which hits the leaves, better for the plant, it's healthier. And the nice thing about it is really that it just keeps plants healthy. There's less loss of water through the broadcast irrigation. You lose some of the water through evaporation. So I don't have a spigot over here, and I can run a hose all the way over from my property, but it's kind of a pain. So I was trying to think how can I use this soaker hose often? And we have 5-gallon buckets here of water that get filled with the rain. So I have plenty of water, just no pressure. And I thought, well, I could suspend a bucket from the ceiling of this greenhouse, and that would build up enough pressure to probably run the soaker hose hot. And I thought, well, we've got this black fabric down here. I should probably try and cool it off because it gets real hot in the greenhouse. Maybe I'll pour water on this fabric. And what I realized was there's a slope. This greenhouse is on a slope. And so when I poured the water out, it basically formed a canal between these two rows of plants. These are my neighbor's plants, these are my plants. And that got me thinking. I used to be an archaeologist, and I thought back to the irrigation style of the Southwest US, where people would have canals and check dams, and that would deliver water to corn. And I thought, what a great idea. I could absolutely do that. And so what I did was I took this ground cover that was stapled down to the ground. I pulled up the staples. So I staked this up out of the way. And then I used a hoe to dig a canal just a few inches deep. And then over here. And then I graded the whole thing with a concrete rake. And then every 2 plants, I added a check dam. Basically, I added one of these pieces of wood, and that would create little places where the water would pool. And this fabric is not very porous, but it will weep if water's standing on it. So basically, I created a canal with controlled check dams to water all of these tomatoes. And I watered them this morning, and you can still see it's damp here. And hopefully, the roots of these plants will start working their way over towards the moisture. That's the goal. So I still water them a little bit. For the most part, I just water down here and trust that they're going to find that moisture. And so here, I take my 5-gallon bucket and I slowly pour it over the edge. And the water begins to pour down. And if you follow us on Instagram, you saw this posted a week or 2 ago. So if you're not following us on Instagram, go ahead and head over there and find us at Low Tech Institute, all one word, on Instagram. And occasionally I post little videos and pictures of things I'm doing. You can see how the check dams go to work. So this water is pooling here. It will soak into the ground and water this plant. And a little bit of water gets by, and it goes all the way down just that way.
And it looks a little wasteful of water to be pouring it on the surface like that, but you know, it took 5 gallons to water that entire row of 70-some plants, and when I did it with by hand with a watering can, it was still 5 gallons. So it's the same amount of water, just distributed differently and a little more efficiently. So that was a lot of fun. Yeah, so we're always trying to think about how people before industrialization were able to accomplish these tasks. And try and emulate them or modernize them if we can. One of the things we did, like I said before, and I'll only have a minute to talk about this, is planting and harvesting wheat, or harvesting and planting wheat in that order. So if you want to see more about that, I'll just show you a little snippet here, but you'd want to go to our YouTube page, which you're already at, and find our video on harvesting and processing wheat, which again, we're going to be doing that again this summer as a workshop. So if you want to come join us, like I said, join our listserv so you can find out and be informed when that happens.
It's time to harvest wheat. This was planted last fall on my neighbor's property, but now if you didn't have fossil fuels, how would you harvest it? And luckily I happen to have the tools to do it, so we're going to be harvesting about 1/10 of an acre, and I'm going to be letting you know exactly how much work it is to harvest 1/10 of an acre. 1/10 of an acre is about 4,350 square feet, and it should have enough, should have about 8 bushels worth of wheat, which will be 450 pounds of grain. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, again, so we're running low on time, so I'm not going to be able to show you much more of that. But yeah, we did harvest that much, and we're still working through it. So, and that was, like I said, industrial wheat, planted for industrial production and harvest. So it's a little different. This year, I planted Maris Widgeon, which is a heritage wheat, and I did that by hand. And I do have just a snippet of that video, which you can also see on our website. So yeah, a real quick snippet of that, and then we'll wrap things up.
Unfortunately, I don't have a horse to pull a plow, so I have to be the horse. It's September, but I already have to be putting in the wheat and the rye for next year. So what I'm doing is their old potato patch. I am scratching the surface. I'm not plowing. I'm just digging up the surface a little bit so that I can plant the wheat in rows, and then pack it back down and cover it with mulch. And hopefully next year we'll have a really good bumper crop of wheat and rye.
So yeah, we're doing experiments and planting densities and harvesting techniques and things like that. So you definitely keep abreast of that if you're interested. So yeah, we had a lot of luck, and we recorded a lot of what we did. So here, I recently published on our website the total calorie count, and this is kind of a very crude way to measure how much food we grew, but you can see how many, here I have how many calories per pound or per quart or per pint, depending on the crop, and how many units of that we harvested. So in the garden I was able to grow 125,000 calories. We were able to gather another over 100,000 calories, including apples, raspberries, strawberries, black walnut, and maple syrup. We had our grains here. Our corn didn't do very well, not because of the deer this year, just because of who knows. But yeah, it didn't do as well as I had hoped. But we still got the bulk of our calories there from the wheat. So even though it was a lot of work, it gave us a lot of calories. And then our animal calories, our eggs, our chickens, our venison, and our honey, for a total of over 1 million calories that I was able to grow, and it was basically one person. We need about 2 million calories to live for the year. Luckily, our backup, or our supplies that we bought in, did equal out, what we needed. Our vegetable oil, our olive oil, all of our bought-in calories was about 1 million, plus the dog food and the chicken food and all that. So that was another 2 million calories. And then, we're not, we didn't take a vow of poverty. We're not monks, so we did have sometimes extracurricular activities. We would buy snacks, or when the pandemic hit, we wanted to support our favorite restaurants, so we would buy out once a week, and we would subtract all those calories. So our meals at dinner, if we bought in 500 calories, we would subtract that off, so we didn't get an inflated number of calories or days that we survived. But we also had extra people living here. My niece came to stay with us for almost 4 months, so that ate extra calories, right? So it actually worked out to not too many extra calories because of that extra calories we gave out for extra people living here. So we were able to grow, I was able to grow half the calories we needed without any actual stress. So if this were an actual emergency scenario, I imagine my wife would be working less than she was during the pandemic, and would be helping me harvest more. There would be more land that we could open up. So I think we absolutely could feed ourselves. The issue that it actually came down to this year was oil. We would run out of cooking oil. We had about 6 gallons of vegetable oil that we bought in, and we're down to about 1 gallon now. We don't have animal fat like butter, because we don't have a cow or a goat. So yeah, we would run out of cooking fat, and cooking fat would be our Achilles heel. So that, for us, would be what our limiting factor is. Our meals would become very fat poor. So anyway, I'm going to have to wrap this up because I see we're at the end of time, but thanks so much for joining us. Tune in this evening. I'll be talking about beekeeping basics for gardeners. If you're a gardener and you want to add bees to your to your garden. That's a great idea. Join us right here at 6 o'clock Central Time, and I hope to see you there. Feel free to write me with questions. Scott at lowtechinstitute.org. Subscribe to all of our things, and thanks so much for joining us. All right, have a great afternoon, and we'll see you next time.